Hello, everyone. Welcome to Vancouver Rape Relief 2020 Montreal Massacre Memorial. This year, we are hosting a series of 12 online events, and you can find the full program on our website, rapereliefshelter.bc.ca. We are live on Facebook and Zoom for today's event titled Women Only Organizing. We'll have Q&A portions, so if you have questions, you can type them in the chat on Zoom or on the comment sessions of Facebook. I'm here with Ashani, my collective fellow, and so let's get started because I think everyone is here probably. So women have been fighting for autonomy for many years, and it was the intentional act of women gathering spaces, sharing their own experiences around women's oppression and male violence, that a lot of action was taken and changes were made. We still have a really long way to go. We're still quite far from being free. Women in South America are fighting against the absurd number of feminicide and still for the right of abortion. Women in India are still having to fight the stigma and discrimination around menstruation. Women are leading a movement to end female genital mutilation in African countries, to end child marriage in several countries of South Asia, South America, and others. And women in Poland right now are fighting back against a retrocess of the little right they have around abortion as well. Women are fighting against the sex trafficking of women and girls and the right to do things that some might consider basic, such as driving, like women in Saudi Arabia just recently won the right of. All of these are battles women are fighting everywhere. We are fighting against the absurd and pornified beauty standards that make women hate their bodies since they are little girls and spend a lot of time and money trying to comply with what patriarchy expects from women and girls. We are still having to educate people on the basics around male violence against women and rape culture. We're still having to support and advocate for women against the sexist and racist system that protects men and their violence. And even though clearly women and girls are still not free anywhere, we're still having to fight for the right to organize and to focus our activism on women. And that is what we'll be talking about today. And for that, we'll have 4 groups from different parts of the world to talk about their work and their organizing. We have Natasha representing Radical Girls. We have Judith representing Women's Place UK. We have Bruna representing QG Feminista. And we have Ashani representing the collective of Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter. So for this first part, each one of you, please just introduce yourself. Tell us what work your group does and why you organize as a woman-only group, or in case of Women's Place UK, why the main focus is fighting for women's-only spaces and sex-based rights. So based on my screen, I think we can start maybe with Natasha from Radical Girls.
All right. First of all, a big hi to all the women here. I'm extremely grateful to have this panel with such amazing women. I am Natasha Noreen. I'm 26 years old, Pakistani Italian girl, and I'm a member of Radical Girls since the beginning, one of the co-founders actually. So talking about RG, Radical Girl, which is going to be constant. So remember, RG is Radical Girls. So we are the young women's movement of the European Network of Migrant Women, which means we are all individual member of the network, and we have evolved organically from it. So starting it was a necessity of the network to have young migrant women start organizing themselves, and we were kind of a response to what was the necessity of it. And we differ a little bit from the other women's collective because we are a part of the network and not an independent collective per se. Although we have our own action plan and we have our manifesto, but still, thankfully, I love being part of the network, where we have got so many great women who support us. We, as values, we are abolitionists. We are abolitionists of any form of sexual exploitation. We are secular and migrant led. You can also actually call us abolitionists of gender stereotype. There's this movement that's going on very strongly right now that puts you in gendered boxes to create more and more, and we are for the abolition of those as well. We are 13 members from Italy, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, France, UK, and Poland, and still counting. This is a little bit about us.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hear more about how you've been organizing and what you're focusing on. Based on my screen,
sure.
I'm gonna go with Bruna from QG Feminista.
So my name is Bruna. I'm 25, and we in QG Feminista, we are here from Brazil. And QG Feminista arose from the necessity of organizing radical material online, because we didn't have when QG Feminista formed, we didn't have enough radical material. And if we didn't have enough radical material, enough information organized, we couldn't organize. So we started to translate and to put together all the information that we thought were necessary. That's how QG Feminista was born. And I wish to tell you more about it, and that's just a little introduction that you asked me to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bruna. We can go with Judith.
Okay, so I'm Judith. I'm Judith Green. I'm one of the co-founders of Women's Place UK. We are relatively new organisation for women's rights in the UK, started in 2017 in response to, well, really a discussion about our Gender Recognition Act in the UK and the effect that proposed changes to the Gender Recognition Act would have on women's rights to single-sex provision, spaces and services, and really the erosion of women's rights to speak up on this proposed change to the law. So we were founded after a woman who was attending a meeting on the subject of the Gender Recognition Act was assaulted in a public space in Speaker's Corner, which is a famous park for place in London for speaking. And so after that, we realized that me and the co-founders and a group of activists who had been involved in social movements and trade unions and women's organizations, that we needed to have a campaign which would assert women's rights to have a voice on the legal issues on the Gender Recognition Act, and also would fight for upholding single-sex spaces and single-sex services, it's a provision in our equality law that those are legal. So it's a campaign for women to be allowed to organise and for women's only spaces to be upheld in law. And so we started with raising issues we thought we would just go through, you know, the labour movement bodies and put forward motions and those sorts of things. It was very, very hard, very hostile environment, but we had a big success early on with public meetings, and that's what we've become most known for is our public meetings. And we've had about 27 public meetings, which have been brought a lot of they're open to anybody, but they're 95% women come to those meetings, and have been really successful. But behind the scenes, we've also been campaigning to meet with people in civil service and to lobby really on this question of the law change, and to meet all the relevant people that we can, and to help women to engage in the public policy process. So in the consultation about that law, and that's what we do. And the government has said that the law won't change, so they won't move to a system of self-ID in Gender Recognition Act, which is actually a huge success for not just our campaign, but the whole of the grassroots campaigns in the UK that have been engaged in that struggle. Big success for us.
Thank you, Judith. I think now I will have Ashani introducing yourself and talking a little bit, and then we can go again on a round, because I want to hear more about why you were choosing to organize as a woman-only, focus your activism on women. So I want to hear more about Natasha and Bruna's work as well, and the motives of it too. But you can go, Ashani.
I guess I'll just introduce myself. My name is Ashani Montgomery. I'm a volunteer at Vancouver Rape Relief, and we're a frontline organization. We have a 24/7 crisis line, as well as a transition house, and we respond to over approximately 100 women and children each month. And we work with women who've been raped, battered, incested, harassed, or in prostitution. And we've we've always had a campaign about the necessity for women-only space. So yeah, I think we'll talk about more of that.
Okay, so I think now we can go back to Natasha, and I want to hear a little bit more about what does your group do, and why are you organizing as a woman-only group?
All right. So basically, I think the answer is just very simple, and also actually complicated. It began specifically, as I mentioned, that we are the young members of the network, which is already a women-only network, and there is this tag we need to actually understand here: migrant perspective. That within European system, I think there is no right representation of migrant women, and let alone young migrant women. So either you are the weak or the poor or helpless migrant person, or you're not seen, or you're invisible. So our movement actually was created in response to this, that not just any kind of visibility we want actual participation in decision making places, and being within a network where we have all women coming from all kind of areas and all ages. It was also kind of necessary to have young women only spaces, because there are some intergenerational gaps that they are often present in feminist circles that are kind of hard to tackle, and maybe it became an extremely good response to have our own space as not only women but as youngsters, because and now we are able to have a better connection with our foremothers and for our just other women, our sisters in the network. Specifically, we have done we do advocacy work. We have done summer camps. That was the fun part. Seriously, feminist summer camps are the best. And overall, we have done sensibilization campaigns, online campaigns. I think it was yesterday you were with my other fellow sisters, Yamur and Alex. You talked about the pornography campaign we did. So, to explain in a bigger perspective, this is all how, we are doing a little bit of all this. I hope it answers the questions.
It does, and we'll definitely have more time. I want to hear more about like this camp for girls only. That sounds very exciting. So we're gonna go back to it. Bruna, I want to hear a little bit more about what exactly your group does and why you started as a woman only and why you organize as a woman only.
We started and we are a women-only organization because in Brazil, it is hard for us, it is increasingly harder for us to talk about our needs as women. So, and this is because it is increasingly harder to define what a woman is. We know, you know what this phenomena is about, and this is arriving in Latin America and in South America in general. And this is hitting us very hard because unlike you, we don't have the resources, we don't have the material. So that's what I said. That's what I said, that we started as a group to aggregate the information, because there were some blogs, some weblogs about radical feminism and about radical theory, and there were already some people doing individual translations and independent translations and fanzines, and that's why we came to be. That's why we started as a women-only organization, because feminism was being colonized. We saw that, so we founded QG Feminista as a form of fighting back. That's our struggle, and we started off in 2017, and now we are starting to actually organize as a collective. We have plans of doing a political formation of our members, because until today we have been working doing our magazine, our online magazine and podcasts, and our zines that we made available online for people to print and work and study together in groups. That's our mission, to make information available. So that's why it's impossible for us to separate our mission of making information available and women-only organizing, because in Brazil these things can't be separated. Women haven't been organizing solely amongst women because they didn't have the information, because they have been colonized by queer theory and by gender studies theory, because that's how it entered Brazil. That's how it entered the academy, because we have like 3 or 4 different books about radical theory, like classic radical theory books, like The Sexual Contract and Sexual Politics, that were translated. I think backlash was also translated, and that's it. And these were translated like in the 80s or in the 90s, and there hasn't been a new edition ever since. I think The Sexual Contract by Carol Pateman has had a new edition like this month. So we do this guerrilla diffusion of PDFs online, because that's how we work, because we don't have the access to information. In Brazil, there is this common thought that being a radical feminist is sharing PDFs online, because how are we going to organize if we don't have the information, if we don't have the resources, right? So we came to be because of this. We started organized because we thought we need to show women that we need to organize as women, that we have necessities, we have struggles that only female people of the human race share. So that's why this is the reason why of our struggle here as QG Feminista in Brazil since August 2017.
Thank you, Bruna. Judith, I think you spoke a lot how you came to...
Yeah, I did. I was carried on and just spoke already
but we are
about how we
always
organize.
Yeah, we're always happy to hear more if you want to add more to it.
I just would add about why we're organising in defence of women-only space and services, and particularly in the UK equality law, we have the concept of a single-sex exemption. It means it's legal to discriminate on the it's lawful to discriminate on the basis of sex, to exclude men, to however they might identify. There is a legal provision if it's a legitimate aim. And so in a sense that is where the definition of sex resides in the UK law, is in this exemption in the Equality Act. And so it's very important to uphold that. It's important because women need those services, and we can make and spaces, we can make endless arguments about women need them for their dignity, for privacy, for safety, for recovery from male violence, but also women should have a right to have this, to assert a boundary without having to provide elaborate justification. So we shouldn't necessarily have to make a positive argument for it. If women want to organize as women, that also should just be accepted. So that it's really important that is the kind of been the center of our demands originally. And then in the course of the campaign, we realized how incredibly hostile the environment was for this campaign. And so, and just how little some of the established feminist organizations were standing up for women. So we have expanded, the campaign, and we have a full manifesto, and sort of revised our resolution, revised our demands to be broader, because there's a big cultural shift that needs to happen for women's voices to be properly recognized and our rights, sex-based rights, accepted, more than just the small issues of the legal issue. There's a bigger cultural question.
Okay, I think I will have now Ashani talking more about what our collective does, what work we are doing, and why we are choosing to organize as a woman-only space.
Yeah, so I'll walk you through a little bit about how I came to be at Rape Relief and how I see women-only space and women-only organizing important to what we're trying to do here. So I came to Rape Relief through our monthly training group. which is for women who are interested in volunteering on the crisis line and in the transition house. And so it's like a weekly session for about 5 weeks, and then you go on shift for 4 months. And then after that, you know, you can be invited to join the collective. And I remember what I thought it was going to be. I was like expecting like a nice like 30-slide presentation. I thought like, you know, we're going to be taught how to answer the phone verbatim. I thought it was going to be structured and rigid and formal, and I was ready to learn. But instead, I got the opportunity to speak intimately and freely with 25 other women about how we grew up and our experiences as women in the world. And for me, it was an entry point into contextualizing how I'd been treated growing up and now how I'm treated as a woman in this world. And there were things that I shared and women shared about, you know, being catcalled and being afraid to walk home at night. And I had just accepted that as the way it was. I'd shared other experiences about the male violence that had happened to me, but you know, I was sort of talking about it as like it was my fault. It was something I had to fix and get over and get closure around. And I thought it was a personal problem that I should work on and shame that I had to deal with. But in that training group, that's when I began to make connections about my experiences and other women's, and that this happened to other women too. And in this group, we saw like men are choosing to hurt us and men feel entitled to our bodies. After I joined the collective, I saw that the structure of the training group was very much intentional. That's what we wanted, because in that training group, that's the first time for many women that they've had a chance to understand the way we're treated in this world is similar to each other and connected to us being born female and growing up in this world as women. The male violence we experience, the silencing, the rigid expectations, all of these are things that affect us and shape us in many ways. And we start to let go of the idea that like this is our fault and it's a personal failing. If that training group had men in it, I know the discussion would have been profoundly different. I don't think I would have shared as much. I think I'd be being afraid of not being believed. I think I would have been expected to be talked over. I think I would have to defend a lot. And I don't think it would have been the experience it was. It would not have been consciousness raising. And the training group was designed for consciousness raising. And again, that was a new term to me coming to that training group. So consciousness raising is a political tool. It's been practiced by feminists since the 60s and 70s. And it's where we gathered in small groups to speak truth about our experiences. And then from those conversations, we strategize and we organize around the world we wanted to live in. And I'm going to say strategize and organize a lot. So I want to talk a little bit more about what that means. So for example, in the Canadian context, in 1973, the first transition house really was created just by 5 regular women. They were moms, they were battered, they were in Saskatchewan, and they saw that there needed to be a place for women to go. This was a time when like domestic abuse and wife battering, it was very much in the private sphere. It was a private problem. There were no state-funded solutions for that. So these women talked among themselves and they offered women safety literally in their basements. And with that, transition houses and rape crisis centers began to spring up. And it wasn't until 1983 when assaulting your wife in Canada was officially criminalized and was a crime. But women grouping together, discussing their lives, what they needed, coming up with practical, radical alternatives paved the way for transition houses. And we just had to wait for the rest of the world to catch up to that. And similarly, in 1969, abortion was illegal. It was unless a mother's life was in danger, you could not access abortion. So actions fighting against this was born out of women's groups. They talked about their bodies. They looked at their cervix for the first time. Some of them taught themselves how to do safe abortions. Women in the 70s organized an abortion caravan that traveled from Vancouver to Ottawa, gathering women along the way to protest against the laws restricting access to abortion. They stormed legislative bodies and they demanded the rights to our bodily autonomy. Again, legislative change came much later in 1988, but it started with women being able to group together, being able to talk about what we know to be the truth of our experiences. And Kathy Sarchild, who talked a lot about consciousness raising in her collective and was also fighting for the right to abortion, she said, the purpose of consciousness raising is to get to the most radical truth about women's situations so that we can take radical action. So Rape Relief, as a part of our public education this summer, we asked women, as a part of our Because I Was a Girl campaign, we asked women to share with us their experiences of growing up as women in the world, and we published them anonymously on their behalf. And I just wanted to share some of the things we posted this summer. So because I was a girl, my father told me that if I don't give children to my future husband, he's going to cheat on me and he's going to leave me. When I revealed to a guy when I was molested as a child, he said it was very cool. When I revealed to a guy that I was molested as a child, he said it was very cool that I learned to give head at 4 years old. Because I was a girl, I was admitted to the hospital many times because my period cramps were so bad that I would faint. Because I am a girl, I have a constant fear of getting pregnant, even though my partner uses a condom every time. Because I was a girl, I was assigned chores by my parents while my brothers were free to go and play. And this is just like a small snapshot of what women shared with us this summer. We know that being born female still means that you're going to be trained, socialized, and forced to submit to men, and that this changes our lives in profound ways. We're still fighting for the right to bodily autonomy. All around us, women are fighting for access to abortion and contraception and against forced sterilization. I was born in Jamaica. We do not have the right to abortion. So I don't have the luxury to sit around and admire how far we've come when we still have so far to go. And I think women in rural communities in BC, in Canada, can also attest to that like it's not useful to have this right if it's not easy to access it. As women, we still live in fear of being sexually assaulted. 1 in 3 of us will be. We still grow up in communities that deny us the opportunities freely provided to our brothers. And women's work is still not valued within and beyond monetary measures, and we're still underpaid. We're still expected to provide the physical and emotional labor of childcare. We're shamed when we go to work and have somebody else raise our kids, and then we're shamed if we stay at home. And I was just reading just a book this summer. It's called Kim Ji-young, born 1982. And in it, the main character was just thinking, like, she said, some demean domestic labor as bumming around at home, and others glorified it as work that sustains life, but nobody tried to calculate its monetary value. And that's probably because the moment you try to put a price on something, somebody somewhere has to pay. And although I do think if women got paid for domestic labor, it would still be undervalued. So we know how much we are limited in what we can even imagine for our lives simply because we were born female. And a part of my role as a volunteer is I facilitate a lot of support groups, and every new batch of women, I ask them to calculate just how much it is that you spend performing every month. How much do you spend on your hair products, on hair removal, on gym memberships, on your nails, on facials, on Botox, on bras, on period products, on skincare, on makeup? And then I ask them to calculate how much they think the men in their lives spend on these same things. So being a girl and a woman in this world, it impacts how we look, how we act in private, how we act in public, what we're allowed to do, what we're encouraged to do, what we're rewarded for, and also what we're discouraged from doing, what we're prohibited to do, and what we're punished for. And it's not an experience that you can co-opt or opt out of because you don't like it anymore. And so we think the current conversations around gender identity are not aligned with how we understand the reality of women's lives. And it's important to us to continue naming male violence against women and demanding our right to decide how we fight to end male violence against women. And that includes the right to fight the right to women-only space. It is from this basis that we fought for equality. And we want to expose and we want to continue to expose the power hierarchy of men over women, and that it is men that are overwhelmingly rape, incesting, harassing, prostituting, and beating women with impunity and have the power to do so. And so what I learned from that training group, and what I've learned from facilitating our support groups and seeing how it's the first time women truly feel safe to talk about their experience in full, to name what happened to them, whether it's rape, whether it's battery, to name the men who did it to them. When I went on shift and I worked in our transition house and I saw how women were able to group and eat dinner together and negotiate chores and talk freely over the dinner table about their experiences to help each other with childcare, I learned how freeing and how necessary women-only space is. And it's essential to how we work. It's essential to understanding our realities, and it's essential in fighting back. So we choose to fight for the right to organize as a women-only organization with other women who have the shared experience of being born without a choice to the oppressed class of women, and to strategize about our resistance and how we choose to fight for women's liberation.
Yeah, I think I definitely shared the same feeling with you, Ashani, when I attended the training group myself, when I was about planning on joining the collective and everything, was that I was not expecting to contextualize my own violence and things I've experienced throughout my entire life as girls and as women. And I was ready to help women, but I think the training group and that space and woman-only space just brought me to the understanding, again, like the cliche, the personal is political, but it's true. I contextualize my own violence as well. And later on, I started to facilitate the training group myself, and I see that with my eyes, women coming to be trained to answer our lines, but actually feeling for the very first time the comfort of being able to sometimes speak for the very first time about the violence that they've experienced. And that gives you so much skills to actually be able to later on offer peer counseling and answering our lines. So I definitely share that with you. Ashani gave the global stat about 1 in 3 women is sexually assaulted in her lifetime. And we know that the numbers are higher for Indigenous women, and the same true for women in other oppressed communities in the world too. And I guess now we are gonna do some comments. I think I'm gonna go for comments first. So we have a comment here, I think for Bruna. Good point, Bruna, about the accessibility of radical feminist theory. Translation is key, and original content as well. And I have here, I'm always so amazed that it was in my own lifetime what an achievement on one generation can make. So we know that we have like 35 people on Zoom right now, and I think we have 30 on Facebook. So I'm gonna read comments and questions throughout our conversation here. I think the next thing is I want to hear a little bit from all our women here right now. What kind of backlash for organizing on the basis of women only do you experience? I know that in Women's Place UK case, you almost kind of exist because you're fighting the backlash already. So,
so we just endless smears.
If you're speaking, I can hear you. I'm not sure if it's just me.
I'm unmuted.
Oh, great, perfect. Yeah. We're back.
So it just endless smears and lies on social media and in regular media, misrepresenting, asserting our boundaries, asserting women's rights as being antagonistic towards people who identify as trans. So right now, when we first started out, we had a very tiny grant from Lush Cosmetics, and then just now they said no, they made a terrible mistake because they've had all this criticism on social media and repudiate their grant to us. So this is the kind of power of the social media smears and lies, and then targeting of people associated with us, or people who speak at our events. So one of our very early events, when we started up, Raquel Rosario Sanchez, who is a student at the University of Bristol, was the chair of that event, and then was subjected to terrible bullying, and the university completely failed to protect their student from bullying. She has a legal case against the university around duty of care. Selena Todd, another speaker at several of our events, has been subjected to terrible sort of threats and needs to have security to do her work. She's a professor at Oxford University. And then the meetings themselves subjected to pickets and intimidation, the venues being called to try and cancel events. What else happens? So just, endless, it feels like an endless kind of battle just to be able to be heard. But the thing is, each time it happens, people start to notice what's all this noise about? Why are these women being shut down? Why are the venues being cancelled, and the protests and so on? And actually, we've got a huge amount of supportive responses as well, and it just increases the visibility of the threat that women's rights are under. So, we're not a provider of services, and we've had nothing like the kinds of threats and issues that Vancouver Rape Relief has had to deal with. No one can, we're self-funding, no one can withdraw our funding. And we don't have a premises that we have to protect. So, in some ways, have huge respect for you, because you've been in this struggle and had this kind of battle for a lot longer. So really pleased to be here.
And likewise, because we know that you came to exist because you were defending women that were being threatened and attacked for speaking up and not being okay with being silenced and erased of the conversation. I don't know if Bruna or Natasha wants to go. We definitely have things to say about backlash too.
Yeah, I would like to tell you an episode that happened just this year. We are a virtual organization, so we don't face like attacks or a backlash on a physical unit, because we don't have one, and people still don't know our addresses, and I hope they don't. I hope we don't get doxed anytime soon. But sometimes until today, we have pretty much managed to stay off the grid. But this year in June, there was an episode when we stood up for lesbians because there was this supposedly lesbian and bisexual women magazine that posted an article about from a male that identifies as a lesbian, that called lesbians who only have relationship with other lesbians, with other females, genital lesbians. And there were many women, there were many lesbians that were revolting against these magazines. And in our group, in our collective, we have many lesbians, and one of our, we feel that lesbians are at the core of the feminist movement, and there is no movement without lesbians. There is no women's movement without lesbians. So we wrote a special edition about lesbian erasure, and people on Twitter, angry people at Twitter, heard about that, and there was this huge backlash on us, on our Instagram and on our website. And we originally post our articles on the Medium platform, but Medium is terrible because they have these community guidelines that prohibit you from criticizing gender identity. And I myself made an article exposing people who say that, oh, no one is forcing lesbians to have a relationship with males, people who have penises, but this is wrong. So I made an article proving this with captures from YouTube videos, from prints from Twitter and from Facebook pages, all in Portuguese, all from Brazil, so that people couldn't say that this is an imported phenomenon. And all hell broke loose, and my article got shut down, and people started, you know, how people, they call on their friends, like, you are following QG Feminista. Mm-hmm. Did you know that this page is transphobic? And we got exposed a few times, but as Judith said, these episodes, they sound as backlash, but on reality, women get to know us and they see that they agree with us. So every time you get exposed on Twitter, we actually get followers. So we don't really care. Like this shakes us. We get shaken. I got really down when my article was shut off from Medium. I sent them an email questioning, and my article got put back on again because I mean, I don't even know if there's anyone that speaks Portuguese on Medium platform reviewing the people who say this is hate speech, because who knows what hate speech is, right? But there were a few times in this episode, the two famous influencers on Twitter from Brazil also called people to unfollow us and called us transphobics. And there were people that they didn't even ever talk to us. There is this one lady who got us blocked on Instagram like for 2 years now, and we never even spoke to her. And she blocked us and she told us we were transphobic. And there's this tactic, like, you can't follow these people, this person, this account, because if you follow it, you are transphobic. So this is just one of the episodes that this has happened. And every time this happens, we follow like 1,000-2,000 followers, but we get another 2,000-3,000 followers of people, of women who agree with us and see that we well, what we're saying actually makes sense, right? And I pretty much I felt a connection with what you two were saying, because what made me question all the speech about gender identity and was this one simple question that we ask our followers every day, like on our comments and our comment session, that is just, what is a woman? This is the magic question that makes everyone question themselves, and everyone that calls us transphobic, we just ask them, what is a woman? And we ask them not to give an answer that's based on stereotypes or a circular thought, because if you say that a woman is anyone who feels like a woman, you're not defining, you're just basing on a circular thought. So this is just a pretty much a little bit of our experience of some of our backlash, and we have been on 3 years now of QG Feminista, and I think we're pretty much successful in our mission, because when we started in 2017, we couldn't say, nobody could say that they were radical feminists, and because they would get shut down, or they, you know, it's like you have the plague. And nowadays we're being invited to give our opinion and to talk to magazines, to journals, and you know, people want to hear us. And this is something big. This is something we accomplished. We are a very big news portal on radical feminists and radical feminism, and on theory and on articles about radical feminism, because we have over 100K followers in Brazil, and this is pretty big, even though we have faced some backlash from year to year. From every like 6 months, we have all hell breaks loose with us, from mostly because of males who identify as female and want to tell us what we have to organize for. And this just shows us why it is so important to organize as a women-only organization.
Yeah, I think you exist to produce, but also translate and make accessible like material on feminism and radical feminism and the fight for sex-based rights and everything. And hearing you saying that now some outlets being inviting you to hear your perspective, that's definitely a victory, 100%. I know that I myself watched a video on prostitution and if prostitution should be abolished or not. And I know that one of your members of QG Feminista was there to give the perspective of why prostitution should be abolished. And I guess like overall, we kind of share the same thing, that we do face backlash, but the support that we get from that backlash, because it's just so threatening and aggressive and so loud that people start to actually see with their own eyes, like, oh, okay, women are actually being silenced, women are actually being threatened. So it's true, like we saw a dramatic increase of people supporting us since we've been, well, I think Ashani can talk a little bit more about that. In the past 2 years, the kind of backlash that we've been facing by the city of Vancouver, but also like threats of like dead animals and stuff. I don't know if Natasha wants to say something now, and then I think you can talk a little bit about our situation here.
So first of all, I'm feeling extremely emotional, and I feel like getting into my PC and give you all big hugs. And I remain astonished every time we as women, like, for me, it's interesting right now, this tiny comment I'm going to make about how we have never met each other, and yet our experiences are so extremely similar. It talks loud and clear. about the discrimination we feel on the basis of our sex, which is like the most difficult thing to describe to the patriarch, to the man who, you know, refuses to acknowledge that. Anyway, rather than I'm getting all hyped. Anyway, backlash. Honestly, we as radical girls, we have not received so much. Maybe it has a lot to do with us being, you know, newly born group, but also that for the moment we are moving around on Facebook, specifically within the radical feminist circles. The backlash we do receive on Instagram. So like the distinguishing between these two platforms, it's quite important, I think, that on Facebook, where you have got, you know, somewhat sensible people, and Instagram is completely, you know, youth attractive or a youth oriented platform. And the analysis here to make from the backlash, like it's not as strong as maybe women's place and maybe the one Bruna faced, but still it's important to understand that more and more youngsters are brought into ideologies that they have not very good understanding. So Instagram being a youth oriented platform, we face more backlash there than on Facebook. It talks loud and clear about the brainwashing of youngsters from very young age. One another thing which I would really like to actually mention, it's not just the backlash, but the problem in organizing ourselves. Like I would compare it to somewhat backlash as women only group, that when we started organizing ourselves, it's really important to understand the procedure that goes within women only spaces. If there is not a base, or if there is not something that has been done before, because our group, it was and I think it's going to be very much similar to many of you, that it was born out of the necessity, but there were nothing that had any base before. So for us, the most the initial biggest problem was also to unlearn the patriarchy, to unlearn the misogyny that is so deep rooted within ourselves. Like we did have all these feminist ideologies, these practices we talked about, but putting that in action, it was the very difficult challenge we had to face in the beginning, because we would get together and we would say that, all right, we have to organize ourselves. But then, you know, there are the certain behaviors that patriarchy has taught us. So like if 2 women or 4 women are sitting together, there is not a lot of love or sisterhood that could be going on. So this was, you know, I think as women only groups, it is one of the initial biggest challenges we face, that we are made to distrust our sisters so much that it takes a very long time. For us, almost it took like 5 months to 1 year to, you know, start formulating the group and to experience the real sisterhood, where you trust your fellow sisters blindly, basically going above the patriarchal stereotype of a feminist, of a woman, of, you know, your being as even as a migrant person. It was very interesting. And yeah, I mean, it was just, I just wanted to underline this, that, you know, these problems once solved, this is what I think this creates, like radical girls, or you know, all our groups here. I think, yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Natasha. Good point about unlearning some rooted patriarchal thoughts and of like dividing girls and women and unlearning this together as a woman-only space. I'm gonna just read some comments. So I have here, what a great triumph in Brazil, well done women. I have another one here, so moving to see women all over the world connecting and finding similarities in experiences. Sisterhood, it's powerful. And I guess now I think before going on, so many amazing comments. Thank you so much for engaging and tuning in. Most likely I won't be able to read it all, but let's just keep going. I want to hear a little bit from Ashani in relation to what kind of backlash for organizing on the basis of women only we face. And
oh God, where do we start? I think it's anything from, you know, I talked a little bit about our training group and the support group that I facilitate. I mean, last year, I think it was, when the women went to a support group. So these are women that called our lines and are now ready to talk to other women. There was like a dead rat nailed to our door, and even when they got rid of the dead rat, there was the smell of the dead rat during a support group for women. And these are, whoever did it, I'm sure they felt really proud, but they like held up an actual support group for women with this protest. There is anything from us being sort of excluded from mainstream media. I'm sure you guys have all heard about the city of Vancouver withdrawing funding that they've given us for many years for our public education, and on the basis that we are not allowed to organize the way we did, and we brought many women. We did a Freedom of Information Act where we looked at the letters that were submitted to them, and majority were supporting us, and they ignored those letters and did their decision anyway. And we organized lots of people, lots of just regular women in the world, lots of other organizations to speak to city council. And again, it just shows the sort of narrative that's going on right now. And I think, like, living in Vancouver, it really does feel like we are quite the minority, but we've received such an overwhelming amount of support, and so much of it is local, because I think I was of the impression that, like, oh wait, the international community is hearing us, but a lot of the donations that have like overwhelmed us even are from local women who see what is going on and tell us every day how much women-only space helped them, and it was something they needed in that moment, and they can't believe how we're being treated. So I'm not as disheartened as I was in the beginning of it. But yeah, that's just some of the backlash we've received, and just anything from just like the not democratic process. I know, Judith, you were talking a lot about labor unions and stuff, but just, you know, being excluded from those sorts of organizations when you're trying to ally around different issues that affect women in a non-democratic way. And it just speaks to just like the larger conversation of radical feminists talking about sex-based oppression being seen as violent, and then it really just like hides the way in which male violence is actually, and patriarchal systems are actually what we really need to be fighting against. And so there's a lot of those conversations happening, of course, online. Even something as simple as when we fundraise on corners, like the comments that we get there. So the backlash for us is everywhere and publicized. So yeah, if there are any more specific questions around that, there is tons we could go into.
Yeah, I think like you mentioning that we got a lot of support and local support.
Yeah.
We know that the trans activism is very loud against us, but we do know, we can affirm that we have like a lot of support, a lot of like local support, but we know also that a lot of people that show support to our kind of position will face backlash in their personal lives. So that's why, of course, that the support that we get is not as loud as the threats that we get. And I think Judy was saying about like lies, and I know that you recently released clarifying a bunch of lies that has been said about women's place UK, even like on media. And I think we face very, very similar situation here as well. Like if you Google our name, is just horrible. It's just so wild, like things that are being said about us, like such as that we don't work with women in prostitution, for example, and that we are practically rallying against trans people, and when we're just here doing our organizing work for women's liberation, and when we work with women in prostitution every day on our crisis line and on our transition house as well. So for sure, lies about us is like a huge backlash that we face as well. And yeah, and threats and everything, like just having like a dead animal on the space that we use to do some public events, or space that we use. We have our support group, our training group.
I think one of our women was spat on while fundraising.
Yeah, that happened too.
So
we definitely hear a lot about how women that are organizing as women only and focus our activism on women have like blood in their hands, but really like we've been facing so much aggressive backlash, very aggressive. And I think that speaks when Judy was saying like that, when people actually see that happening, they're like, oh, okay, that's when like the support increases for sure, because it's very aggressive and it's very loud. And we know that like women that represent our group, that are like us right now, like public with our faces, they faced like being called turf on the street, or being spat when we're like fundraising. So and we know that again, like Women's Place UK came because a woman was being assaulted because was speaking up. So yeah, but again, like Ashani was mentioning in relation to the letters that were sent, I believe that was like 200 letters or around that were sent to the city council. And we know that again, because we know that people face so much backlash in their personal lives, like that, basically the same thing. It's absurd what we face on the city of Vancouver. When we were speaking about why we organized the way we organized, they didn't ask us any questions about our work directly to us. They will ask questions about us to other people, mainly people that were against us. But when it was our time to speak about our position and why we choose to organize the way we organize and why we do the work that we do the way we do, they didn't even give us the chance. So very not democratic at all. I think, I don't know if you want to add something, you can add something, but I can read some comments and questions as well now. I have a question here. Can you describe what has worked for you in organizing as women across class and race alliances? I think we know that all women face male violence regardless their race and class, but we definitely know and learn every day more and more with our frontline work that if you are an Indigenous woman, a Black woman, and a woman of color, a poor woman, that makes you definitely more vulnerable for male violence against women. We can see that every day from organizing and from our crisis line for sure. Does anyone else want to answer on that? So I will read some comments as well.
I could answer a bit about our experience on that. So, you know, we're formed out of social movements on the left with a clear sort of anti-racist position, and it's been really important because often differences of class and race get kind of covered up in the assertions around, you know, women are a sex class and therefore, you know, this fight that we're in now for sex-based rights must take, you know, that's the emergency, that's the existential threat, so therefore we must work with everyone and put aside any differences, and that leads into some really difficult places, because of course most people I would say the position that sex is real and sex is a material reality, biology is real, that is a position that is held by 99% of the world believe that, including some really right-wing racist people who would like to deny us abortion. They know that sex is real. They probably think that gender then flows from sex and should remain, but it's not simple to just say we must have unity on this question, sex is real, because then you end up allied with people who are like, if you were allied with racists, for example, you then can't have a unified movement of women, because
you exclude the rest of us. Exactly.
Where does that put black women? Where does that put women of color are the majority of women in the world? So you can't. So to have a principled position, it's really important to recognize, to have an anti-racist position, and also on the issue of class. The problem, there are single-sex spaces matter for all women, but they especially matter for the poorest women, because for women who say, oh well, I don't mind having mixed sex spaces, I don't mind who's in my who's in the bathroom with me or the toilets with me or whatever, that's okay, that's a choice you can make. But don't give away the rights of women who are most likely to need refuges, most likely to be in prison, most likely to need homeless shelters. It's not okay for women who are privileged to give away those rights on behalf of others. So race and class really matter in that way. In a practical sense, I think, that means that we think about who's on our panels and in our conferences, who we work with, who we amplify the voices of. I think that's really how it's reflected, and think about the bigger picture and the class politics and the race politics of what we're doing.
Yeah, to jump off that, I really do think, especially when you think about like in the media, it's really hard to get space in a very liberal media to talk about this position. So it could be tempting to take up the offer by right-wing media. But if you think about how right-wing media has money to even give you that platform, it's because they have been living off of the avails of capitalism and years of like racist structures. So it's not useful to take advantage of those kind of spaces. And I think on the other side too, what's really annoying to see, I think, like as a Black woman, I get attacked for having the position I have, and you hear things like, there was a time when Black women weren't considered women too, and things like that. And it's really insulting to me personally, because I think it just explains how much not of a woman you see Black women as. But also, if you're talking about a time where Black women weren't seen as women, you're talking about times of slavery, you're talking about times where we were exploited and raped because we were women, and we were experimented on because we were seen as less than, and that was because of our sex. So if that's your argument, it's not really even a good one. So I think, like the lack of race and class analysis is on both sides is really it really like just prevents a bigger conversation from happening in my mind.
Yeah. And I guess what Judy was saying about like the importance for women of color in general to have these spaces, and women in need, like that our transition house, we know we've been talking a lot about that 78% of women stay in our transition house are Indigenous women of color, and 72% of them, now talking about class, are poor, living in poverty, and 18% of them working low paid income jobs. So that speaks a lot. Our transition house, we're saying 78% of the women needing our space, needing our peer counseling, our grouping of women, our safe space, 78% of them are Indigenous women and women of color. And we know that Judy also mentioned like women being incarcerated and all that. We know that Indigenous women in Canada are 4%, and therefore, and still like 42% of incarcerated women in Canada. So,
and in some provinces, they make up 50% of the prison population compared to their representation in the population at large. Like Black women and Indigenous women are the fastest growing rate of incarcerated women. So again, yeah, I really agree with what Judith was saying.
Yeah, and tomorrow, because we're talking about that right now, tomorrow we're gonna have the part 2 of our race, class, and male violence against women. So we will definitely be talking a lot about that. So I encourage you, if you haven't seen the part 1, just go to our Facebook page that is available right now. And tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific time, we're gonna have, again, the conversation around that. So the question can be answered in a way more depth conversation as well. I have a comment here. Thank you for addressing the issues of race and class in terms of how they both affect our organizing. I have a comment here, it was back then, but I will read it anyway. Good point, Ashani, in relation to abortion. Abortion may be legal, but it's still inaccessible for so many women in rural areas and the Maritimes, and wait times causing increased danger to women, clinics not being covered by Medicare and charge $780, $50, $100 out of the woman's pocket. Legality doesn't mean access. And again, that resonates our work on the crisis line as well, because we do get calls from women saying, I need to have an abortion and I don't have the means to, and or even I don't have anyone to support me through this and drive me or anything like that. And we paid for women flights to come to Vancouver. We had housed women to stay here during the process of abortion and everything. So for sure, even in places that abortion it's legalized, it doesn't mean that it's accessible. And I think during COVID, we had a conversation about the impact of COVID and our response to women. We saw some, how that was like COVID was used as an excuse to limit the access to abortion and not treat as an essential service available for women as well.
I just remember, sorry, in the city council fight, one of the city councilors was like, well, you know, if you look at this panel, it's like half women. And it was sort of a like, yeah, well, we need to pat ourselves on the back where we've made so many advances.
We came so far.
We've came so far. And I'm just thinking like, oh, wow, you've come so far. Yeah. It's like not the truth for a lot of women, even in Canada. So.
For sure.
I would like to comment something on the race and class question, because the scenario here in Brazil is a bit complicated, because the discussion around considering the sex-based oppression of females as something that that marks us, marks our existence as female throughout our existence, right? Marks our experience. Not only is it considered hate crime, it's considered to be excluded. So we don't have the space to talk about it on the left, neither on the left nor on the feminist groups, and we on QG Feminista, because the question was about how we deal with it. And in QG Feminista, we got to the same conclusion as Judith and Women's Place UK, that the answer is to focus on the majority of women that are the basis of the social pyramid, that is women of color and Black women here in Brazil, because they being the majority of women, they represent what's shared by the majority of us as women, as females. So even though Black women and indigenous women and women from Latin America, Latin women, and as white women as myself, we have different realities because of the color of our skin. We share the same experience of being female, and when we focus on the reality of the women on the basis, that's how we can group most of the women around us. So when we focus on Black women, and consequently here in Brazil on poor women, on women of the working class, consequently, as you said, women who are incarcerated, women who are in drug trafficking, women who are mothers, we gather most of women around us. When we talk about their experiences, that's how we gather women around us, because there is no way we talk about an experience about a Black woman that a white woman as a female didn't have the experience, because it's the most broad possible as a female. But in Brazil, it's hard to talk about these experiences. It's hard to talk about sex experiences, things we experience because of our sex, our reality as females, because the Black movement is very strong, and the Black movement, they focus on race being the primary source of oppression, and we don't think it's productive to confront these people, say no, it's not, because it's such a different approach and a different epistemology of thinking, that Pan-Africanism, that we think we just do the alliances that we think it's necessary with Black people, not confronting them about whether it's sex or race, and seeing things in a consubstantial way in terms of social relations, like sex, class, and race. And in the left, if the left were talking about class oppression, it would be a good thing, because they are not. So in Brazil, because if they were talking about doing redistribution wealth and tackling the banks and taking away lands from rich people and giving it to the poor, it would be a good thing. But our left in Brazil is not talking about it anymore. They are focusing on gender identity, and that's why we lost in mass in our municipal elections. Like our oldest and biggest party, left party here in Brazil, that is the Workers' Party, just they always got a city council, a city government in municipal elections, and they didn't get any in these last election, any in the whole of Brazil. And this is just, we think our understanding is that this shows how our left has distanced itself from the real needs of the people, of people who are hungry and people who need jobs, and
Agreed.
and we try to, this is what we try to do as women. We try to show people statistically who are women, why are they oppressed, why historically also, why are they being oppressed? Why are women the majority of poor people? Why are women the majority of people in prostitution? And because you can't argue with facts. This is how we strengthen ourselves. We can't, people can't keep doing philosophy when we give them facts and numbers.
And I think you just mentioned prostitution too, and again, in relation to race and all that, we have a comment here, good point about race and class privilege. This also applies to prostituted women, particularly as we see in the academic community taking positions that appear oblivious to the real lived experience, as you were saying, of women without the same opportunities or choices. And again, from our work, we know that while Indigenous women are only 3% of women in Metro Vancouver, they make up 27% of women in prostitution calling our lines. And that goes for Black women too, because Black women are only 1.2 of women in Metro Vancouver, and they make up for 14% of the women calling our lines in prostitution too. And now it goes kind of what Bruna was saying. Now I have another question here too. What are effective ways radical feminist groups can separate themselves from right-wing discourse and transphobic discourse when the average liberal person are not willing to listen to your message fully? I can just start very quickly and give the word to all of you. It's very interesting because myself, for example, when I'm like facilitating training group, we have women coming in and we discuss the way that we organize and why we organize this way. And we do consciousness raising exercise. We talk about our experience when we were girls and what that meant until our womanhood and all that. And we have a very good and honest conversation with each other on our first session. And then they go home, for example, and Google things and like hear this whole discourse about us being transphobic or all lies that they hear about us. And it's just, there's a complete disconnection. They come to our second session saying like, it's just not like, if I just Google you, it's completely different of who you actually are and the way that you're actually organizing and the work that you are doing. So it's very difficult when we are trying just to have a conversation and just show why we do the way we do the things and the work that we do, when no one wants to even engage in conversation with us, just shutting us down right away. So again, I will repeat the question. So what are effective ways radical feminist groups can separate themselves from right-wing discourse and transphobic discourse when the average liberal person are not willing to listen to your message fully? I think some of us started kind of touching a little bit on that, just the fact that KJ, for example, are having their own platform and are producing, but also translating and spreading feminist content and sex-based rights and stuff like that. And we as well, we are using our Facebook page. We have a podcast. We are producing videos and we are doing this whole conversation, which is amazing. We're doing over Zoom because of the pandemic, but I think that there's a lot that benefits about that. We being able to have this conversation together and reaching a lot of people. So that's good too. So definitely using our own platform to talk about these issues and our experiences and our work and everything else. So an independent feminist media. So does anyone want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think this is one way, creating our own platform, because one of the main problems we have as radical feminists is deplatforming. The mainstream media mostly doesn't want to hear us, and we get shut down from blogs like WordPress and Medium, and like Reddit just banned a lot of places where they hosted, where people got together and just talked about, for example, detransition. It was a major place for people to talk about detransition, a source for people to talk about and find articles and this stuff. And I think one way for us, I think we can't control how people see us. Like if they want to find us transphobic, they will find us transphobic. If they want to consider us right-wing, they will consider us right-wing, even though there are tons of resources and materials in our website saying that we are anti-capitalist and we are asking for a revolution, and that we want autonomous organizations, and that we consider capitalism a source of oppression. That doesn't matter. I think people, sometimes we use George Orwell's book 1984 to quote how people just they make up the reality that they want to keep on believing on what they want to believe. So even though we say I see that we as radical feminists, sometimes we feel the need to keep justifying ourselves, justifying our need to self-organize our spaces as single-sex spaces. And we say, no, we think that trans people deserve to be treated as human beings, but we just want our spaces, our protected spaces, our exclusive spaces. And people, they will get all of this and they will just listen. We don't want trans people here, and we can control that. So we at QG Feminista, we just sort of gave up, and we just accepted that no matter how many times we say that we are not the bad guys, we're just women, because this is misogyny. That's how it works. This is patriarchy, and it depends on the women. It depends on they developing the consciousness that they too are oppressed, and they need to gather around with their sex class, and that we can do for them. So if they want to consider us right-wing, if they want to consider us transphobic, there's really nothing we can do. I mean, we can not be platformed by right-wing spaces, but I think we can all agree this is a shot in the foot, and we don't need to do that. I mean, there's no need. We making alliances with right-wing people, with right-wing parties and organizations. It's not a real strategy. We don't agree with that anyway. So we'd rather not have a platform than having a right-wing platform. Mm-hmm. So I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it goes completely against to why we are organizing as a woman-only space, aligning with right-wing for sure. And I know that Judith wants to talk too, and I know that Natasha also might have things to say because you produce your own content as well, and YouTube videos and everything. So.
Natasha, do you want to go first?
It's fine with me, but all right. I go. Honestly, I agree completely with Bruna on this, that people they would anyway find whatever point they can to go against you. What our strategy is to remain focused on what our goals are to achieve. Then it's up to people how they want to define us. That's none of my business. How they want to defame us within their circles, how they are talking about canceling or calling out all the famous liberal ways of hating against women. It's that cannot be controlled at this point. This is what what we are doing, that we have some knowledge, we are putting that on the table. So it's up to you a little bit, like, because we cannot feed you with a spoon. We can provide you maybe, but you have to come and eat that food. So this is what it is, that we do the research, we put whatever campaign we have to do, but then it's on the singular individual, unfortunately, or I don't know, fortunately as well, that they have to do the you know, their part, and it's extremely important. I mean, yeah.
I want to hear Judith too, and then go back to, I want to hear about the camp for young women too. So a note to myself.
I think it's right that, so the question was about effective ways to separate yourself from a kind of right-wing discourse, transphobic discourse, when you've got the whole, or what seems like the whole of this sort of progressive, liberal, left space, saying that fighting for women's rights is inherently anti-trans, which seems to be the position, very widely held position in progressive, liberal, left spaces. So it's true that the kind of liberal centre has really failed to allow this conversation to take place in a, you know, respectful, sensible way. Possibly, you know, more in a, they have more responsibility than really extremist activists in a way, because it's only because the liberal progressive centre kind of is refuses to engage with women's arguments that the extremist position gets so much traction and has had so much power. I think it's really important, you know, building your own platform and just, you know, being determined to, you know, produce your own media, have your own meetings is really important. I think it's having very clear demands as well, and having, being focused on that. I mean, it was really wonderful, the kind of richness of Ashani's description of strategizing and organizing. I have to say, I feel in comparison, we've been really just very reactive, and we have just, you know, 5 demands, and we just repeat these 5 demands and say, you know, this is what we stand for. It's very simple. It's very minimal. If you can't, you know, it exposes how extreme the demands of activists on the gender identity or trans rights side of the argument, how extreme their position is, because our demands are so moderate. And I think that by being consistent in that, there are probably a lot of people, the liberal left progressives, who, you know, actually, you know, they don't actually think that we're so bad. They just are a bit scared, you know. And they will have to move, they will have to change their position. We just had a court case just the day before yesterday, really important court case. Kira Bell and Anonymous Mother took a court case against part of our National Health Service over puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for children. And they won the case, but the ruling, the judgment is so clear about the rights of children and the issues of consent and the lack of evidence and the level of harm, and just, you know, how experimental this treatment is. And it's such a clear judgment, crushing judgment. And people who consider themselves, you know, they're for human rights, children's rights, they want, you know, rational, evidence-based healthcare, you know, these people will have to shift their position, because otherwise they just seem like, I mean, you know, they have to respond in a rational way to this kind of judgment. And I think it will open up a space for people to say, no, we need to proceed on the basis of evidence. So all you can do is just keep going and make your own platform and your own spaces, keep on message and keep going. And then, you know, eventually the tide will turn. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think we share the same thing, because we always say that just the fact that we are here still after we came 1973, and we're still fighting to exist and organize the way that we have been doing since ever. And that's already a message for sure. And repeating like the simple requests that we are making of existing and having the right to organize that the way we organize. And I know that Women's Place UK has a fantastic website and presence on Facebook. So that's amazing. And QG Feminista is just such an amazing platform. As a Brazilian can speak, I think it's so important to have women producing new content on radical feminism and women's rights and everything, but also translating and giving access to material that already exists. So that's pretty amazing. And for Radical Girls, same thing on Facebook. I know you produce videos about very important things and big campaign around pornography. That it's definitely, we had a session, a Zoom and live on Facebook this week as well about the impact of pornography on women's lives. And so I appreciate that very much as well. I want to hear a little bit, just because we know that this whole, with the liberal movement and trans activism being so loud and media not giving us the opportunity to engage and talk more freely about all that. I'm like wondering, because I know that Radical Girls, you host like a camp for young girls, and I find that very important. I want to hear a little bit about how that particular experience is, because I know that a lot of young women are not politicized still. So having like the opportunity of being in a feminist camp and hearing like what you have to say, and if you can elaborate a little bit about how that looks like.
All right. I mean, that's the best experience, honestly, because up until now, we have had 2 experiences of summer camp with young girls, and all the time it has been fulfilling, because I think this is like, if we targeted actually young girls from 15 to 18, 19. So, you know, at the age where young girls are actually questioning about their identity and their existence in a patriarchal, you know, structure. And honestly, I feel kind of proud and lucky that we caught them in between this struggle, and we somewhat acted as elder sisters, guardians. I don't know which word to use, but we were able to engage with these women so profoundly, because the womanhood experience, it's born with us. The hatred, the misogyny, it's, you know, we are gifted that as a birth gift when we are born. So even at that age with young girls, I found it very easy to dialogue with these girls, that they have all these concerns about harassment, about male gaze. Like, they're very tiny issues for them, and I think this is the age where they start normalizing it, they start accepting it, and having the dialogue with them and saying that, you know, this is not right. And on the other hand, when the liberal media, like mainstream media, is telling them also that this is fine and this is okay, he's just being funny, or he likes you, that's why he's like, trying to spat you or do something. Having that moment and tell them, like, it's not, if you don't feel okay, be accepting that abuse, because you have an innate this sense of justice, I call it, that we have an innate sense of justice because we are born into such misogynistic law that does not, it never prioritizes us. So we know that something wrong is being done, but we are silenced as well. So giving them this hope, this perspective, this radical feminist, because already I saw that they were seeing it as somewhat threatening. So having to have this conversation from one to one, it's a big group, like 12, I think we had, and 10 on the other time. The best magic always happened on one-to-one conversation, that they would come to you and they would actually trust you and tell you their experiences. And as maybe Ashani was mentioning, that they feel liberated, that I'm not alone, it's not my fault somehow, and I should not adjust to what is being taught to me. I can rebel to that. It's really, really nice to have this sense of for me it was like sense of fulfillment, having these girls by the end of this 1 week summer camp being able to call themselves feminist, and radical feminists specifically. I mean, there is nothing more beautiful than that, than having these very young minds who are able to understand that. And then you sit down and think, but I've had conversation on Facebook or on Instagram with a 40 years old man, and he was not able to get these basic concepts which these young women are able to grab so quickly, just like that. It talks very loud and clear about our, reality which we live on the basis of our sex as soon as we are born. It's extremely important, and yeah, it's fulfilling experience overall, the summer camps. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. I wish I would have this in the past when I was like young. Just by having like women telling me, do not watch pornography. Please do not do this to yourself and to your own sexuality, for example, or telling me like the violence that you are experiencing is because you were born a girl and it's not your fault. That's the words that we are living in, and that's what we are fighting against. Pretty amazing. I'm inviting you, if you have any last words to say, if any of you wants to say anything before we finishing today's session.
Just to say that was a really lovely description, Natasha, and really, I think it's really important that we have those sorts of joyful experiences and ways of organizing as well. I think the as hard as some of the organizing is, it's also incredibly rewarding. And when you have like a big conference, I can't wait for this pandemic to be over, because I just want to be in a big hall with lots and lots of women, and just the connections that we've been able to make through the campaign have been incredibly rewarding. I'm just seeing one of my sisters on the chat saying we should have a summer camp, so you inspire. But we all have to look at those good things as well as how difficult the circumstances we're in.
Yeah, I agree with you. Our training group, for example, it's very refreshing for us and amazing to have like new women coming to us and talking to us and sharing our thoughts and everything, and our support group too. I think everything we do here just reinforces every day why we believe on the way that we organize.
I just want to say thank you for the invitation. I think this was very very refreshing to hear from you and to share our experiences, because every time women gather, we get that feeling that we're not crazy and that we're doing the right thing, and we're going the right way, and especially to see that we're all organizing the same way. I think this shows us that even though we are from different places and we all have such different backgrounds, this is actually a theory. This is actually a political practice that makes sense because it can be applied to such different realities. And so this meeting has been very enlightening, very enriching for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I guess our unity and our alliance, it just makes us stronger. And so thank you so much for being here with us and having this conversation with us. Thank you so much for the viewers on Zoom and on Facebook. We're very happy that we were able to have this conversation today. Thank you so much. This video will be available on demand immediately on Facebook. And I invite you to watch tomorrow's event. It's going to be, again, Race, Class, and Male Violence Against Women, Part 2. We already have available the Part 1 on Facebook if you're interested. It's going to be tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And 6 p.m. You can watch it live on Facebook or on Zoom. And for all the details and the full program, you can access on our website, rapereliefshelter.bc.ca. Thank you so much again, and I will see you tomorrow.